What episode is it?
281, I believe.
281-330-8004.
Oh, God. Wow.
Call Mike Jones. That was a big deal in Houston, obviously. But the record should reflect that 281 is the secondary area code for Houston. So that was...
It's the 718.
It is the 718.
Is it like a new one that they made recently? Or?
No, it's actually now like kind of a vintage one, but it was the second one. 713 is the 212 of Houston. But 281 got famous because of Mike Jones. Do you think his number is still active if you call it? I feel
like there was something viral about it that like he was like, doing some interview and he was like, oh yeah, let's like steal my number. Like,
well, I
or
think
something like that.
this song came out when I was in middle school. So it was a big phenomenon. I think there was like a 2-day period where he hadn't like taken it off the books yet, but then eventually they set it up so like it was an automated like voicemail thing
Like
that
an
was
ad
like
for the album.
Yeah, exactly. So
It's Alex!
well, it is episode 281 of View from 202. It's the four of us, Brit, Cork, Peaches, Sam, and no patter. We got to get straight to it. We have to address something very annoying. I'm very dismayed that we have to even bring this up. But no, it is not true that View from 202 has been posting on the nude Metro forums. These are scurrilous rumors. We would never do that. We never be talking on the Anything Goes attendance weekly thread. We do not go to the threads about, DPs and difference makers. None of that is true.
There's plenty of people with Corky Caporal usernames around those forums. I don't know why you would assume that's me.
Yeah, no, do not compare the text, the syntax in our tweets versus the syntax on those forums.
What forums?
Exactly. I could never even imagine. I only podcast
it's members
my
only.
thoughts.
Anyway.
Yeah, I only podcast my thoughts about this. I would never besmirch Red Bull's discourse by posting on a classic Comic Sans forum. So get that out of your head immediately. But I apologize for even putting this in your mind, for even thinking about that. But we just had to tackle that from the get-go. With that sorted bit of business behind us, this is a September episode. This is our first fall episode of View from 202.
Pumpkin Spice 202.
It is officially Mr. Autumn Man walking with cardigan season.
We are finally starting dressing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wore a baseball jacket out today.
Ooh.
It's that weather.
It is. Yeah. It is indeed. The sun is setting before 7 rather. And we've got 3 games that have happened for the New York Red Bulls in the interim. Right now we're recording after the Atlanta game and before the NYCFC game. And you know what? This has ended up being an apropos entryway into this episode because I'm feeling like the theme of this episode might be periodization. Periods, times, thinking about how we group and consider things in our minds after the fact, or sometimes as they happen. Because I think this last 3 games is kind of a interesting snapshot to consider that, and especially with the Derby coming up. Because most recently, the Atlanta game is officially the last time Dax McCarty will have been at Red Bull Arena as a player, as he was visiting with Atlanta United, and he announced he is retiring at the end of the season. Were any of you there to see it? I wasn't.
So, I got to the arena probably like 25 minutes before kickoff. I decided I wanted to get a foot-long hot dog, so I went to the foot-long hot dog stand, the only one in the stadium in the far corner.
I didn't know we had that. Maybe I forgot. Go
Isn't
on.
it called
Sorry.
like the dog company or something?
Oh, the
No. You're
Harrison hot
thinking
dog.
of the Harrison Hot Dog Company stand on the other side of the stadium,
Which
but
isn't footlongs.
they don't have the footlongs, but they do have the Harrison Hot Dog, which I've never gotten. I don't know what's
I think
inside.
I've gotten from there before, and it's just a fucking normal Delaware North hot dog.
Yeah,
They have a decimeter
rock
long.
hard
Remember you
bun.
learning the metric system? They're like, yeah, it's everything in 10. You got centimeter, you got and you got meter, and you're like, wait, what is in between? They're like, oh yeah, I guess technically, theoretically, there's a decimeter, and it's like, why does no one use that?
Anyone use that?
The Harrison Hot Dog Company, based in fucking Graz, Austria,
Right.
Salzburg, Austria, uses the decameter.
But I was trying to get a footlong hot dog at the footlong hot dog stand, and while I was waiting online, there were like 8 people in front of me, and the card reader just didn't work, and like the people in front of us were like, we want to go to our seats, can we just like pay in cash? And obviously Red Bull Arena is a cashless venue, so they had to wait holding these 4 foot-long hot dogs in their hands for them to sort out their payment thing. I didn't see it through to the end because I was just like a little concerned about
This is why you
eating at
didn't
this
see
point.
Dax.
I was gonna say, where does Dax come in? Did
I'll
Dax
get
end up
there, I'll
eating
get
one of the
there.
hot
Yeah,
dogs?
so I then go to the hamburger stand behind 133-ish.
Section 133, as everyone commonly says, sections.
And I was waiting online there. There were like 6 people in front of me, and they get their burgers, and they'd run out of the burgers on the griddle. So it had taken them like 16 minutes to make a new burger because I was like now at the front of the line. During this is when the Dax McCarty thing starts happening. So I'm waiting online.
They cheated you. You got to email Bill Hochul.
Honestly, I expect Mark to...
Your core memories were stolen from you.
I expect Mark de Grand Prix to award me $10 in e-cash to be able to afford a footlong hot dog next week, so I don't have to deal with the credit card payment. Anyway, I was waiting online for the Dax thing, and I'm excited. You know my appreciation of Dax McCarty. When we started this podcast, I think he was like maybe my favorite sports player of all, like at the time. So I'm like very into the Dax ceremony, like eyeing it from like in the concourse through the section like opening right there. But it seemed like it was pretty boring. Otherwise,
First off, I gotta say congratulations. That is the closest you've come to pulling off a full Shaggy Dog story. That was pretty good. It didn't quite have enough. It almost had too much payoff still. And you could have thrown in one extra stand that you visited, but it was pretty good. I really want the metaphor of everyone holding hot dogs and being forced to miss the ceremony to like work as a metaphor, but I don't know if it does. I don't know if that is emblematic of the season. I don't think it is, because I feel like we're being left empty-handed here, but I really just wish it were a better metaphor than it is. And finally, I'm a little disappointed that none of us actually were able to see the ceremony, because I am wondering whether or not we invented a new ring of honor. Ring
there
of
was like a
hell
little
for...
compilation videos of like people who had played, I think, for Red Bull and Dax at the time.
Because as the listeners know, we are a little fascinated with all of the new layers of the Divine Comedy that Marc de Grand Prix is inventing for like the Legends Row and Retired Number and then 20 and 20. Has Dax been inaugurated
Dax
into a
is
new one?
already in 20 and 20, isn't he?
No, because in 20 and 20 they decided to not do active players.
Was the 20th anniversary in 16, right? So.
Yeah, 15, 16.
I thought they did current players for 20.
They didn't. Well, because that was the other. That was
because
the
Robles and
awkward thing about 20 and 20 is that 5 to 6 of those guys were kind of reaches.
Yeah.
And if they had done it been able to do it a few years later, obviously several guys that were current players would have been in that. If
are
we
we
just
are in 25 by 25 by now? But I think
we're past that.
The Ring of Honor. I heard was through the Discord that you officially, there's a rule about how many years you've retired or something for you to qualify for
There's
that.
a rule.
Yeah, exactly. That it's very official that they made up. So he doesn't qualify for the Ring of Honor yet, but maybe soon he will.
Luis Robles was retired for like 4 months when we brought it.
Yeah.
There's a rule. Okay.
But I
Just like there's vice captains.
yeah, but also 11 is not a good number to retire in soccer, so we should not do that.
I don't think we should retire his number.
Yeah.
I don't think.
It rose to that level.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're gonna have,
especially because I mean, obviously he had his biggest years with us, and he's probably almost definitely a bigger part of our history than any other club, specifically through winning trophies. But he also did spend pretty significant stints with other clubs. It's not like he belongs to us alone.
Yeah, he's not like a one club guy.
Right.
also we did. I mean, I am genuinely at least a little encouraged that it seems to be past us how awkward the departure was, you know, because we did trade him while he was like getting married, could have handled that business better, but evidently that, bygones are bygones, and they had the little ceremony and everything.
I mean, at this point, barely anybody left who was directly involved in that decision for him to leave anyway. So
Right. Yeah. I mean, Ryan Mara really is like the last connection. And then I guess I don't know if they're keeping Connor Lade around to do
Bradley Wright Phillips is still
content
employed
or whatever.
by the club, I think.
Sakaya, I guess. Too.
Yeah.
Although, did they actually overlap? I mean, Sakaya would have been a coach
Yeah,
for sure, but did
They
they?
overlapped. Played together
Yeah.
Okay.
in 2015 or 2014 at least.
14.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. But yeah, I mean, to your point, that was my first jersey. Red Bulls jersey was a Dax jersey, and I kind of screwed it up because I got it signed when he came back for that first game that he played when he was in Chicago. He stayed and he signed autographs all around, and I was wearing that jersey, and he just signed it, and it was like sweaty and everything because I was wearing it and I didn't know that was going to happen. And like the Sharpie like totally just like bled. And then I brought it home and I was like, oh, I can't wash this because it's going to bleed even more. And then I brought it here with the idea that I would steam it in the fancy LG deluxe steaming closet. We should refresh this piece of lore for the listeners. I'm currently tapping it. Peaches has a like Dr. Freeze sort of. Is that who it is in Batman?
Mr. Freeze.
Mr. Freeze closet that you can put clothes into and it will steam it to precise specifications. And then we were like, oh, wait, we can set the autograph by ironing it. I think we read that. And then we did it and we accidentally touched the number and it melted it. And now it's all fucked up and there's like red ink all over it.
But at least you still have his signature on your New York City FC ticket.
That's true. I do
You
have
got
that framed.
but you missed one, right?
I had all of the hardest signatures. I got Gonzalo Verón. I got Gideon Baugh.
Which is the hardest one.
Yeah. I got...
You even got Jesse Marsh, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
But I'm missing Dax and... like some of the easier players. Who else even scored on that?
Brad.
Yeah, so I could still get theirs. That is my most valuable tchotchke, I think.
Is
at this
the
point
ticket
still.
from the 7-0 game.
Yeah,
Yeah.
still have that framed. But yeah, I don't know. I guess it is interesting. It has got me in a reflective mood about the league, although that isn't not unusual for episodes in the last season or two of this show. I think it's also interesting that Peaches, as you alluded to before we started recording proper, it's become a bit of a meme and a theme in soccer internet to, talk about everything being peak Barclays. And it's got a question going of like, are people just nostalgic? Is it false nostalgia, or is there actually something different going on with sports right now, and soccer in particular? And I don't know.
Are we in MLS 5.0 now? Is that?
It's a good question.
Are we beyond the numbered system of eras in MLS? Remember that? MLS 2.0, MLS 3.0?
If we're in MLS 5.0, what was MLS 4.0? I don't know.
See, I would just say it's like everything.
It's been a long time since I've regularly been on our MLS, the subreddit.
I don't think anyone's.
Reddit, you'd
really.
be surprised. There was some discourse being kept about 3.0 and 4.0 and like what it meant and stuff like that. But anything that's gone beyond that, I've lost track of. As far as whether there's like any concrete discourse about that. Is there any discourse about MLS is maybe more the question these days.
I think,
but yeah,
if I had to volunteer some potential points, I think the moment that Atlanta made it to the final and they unveiled a tifo that said MLS 3.0 on it, like the implication being that Atlanta is like the harbinger, is history on horseback for MLS 3.0. That seems like an inflection point to me of like, okay, now MLS 3.0 is over. Like,
yeah.
That's done. Maybe. Another inflection point maybe is, well, obviously COVID.
Yeah.
Like, and then City winning the cup and everyone deciding they did not care. And just there being nothing about it. At least personally for us, for Red Bulls fans, that feels like a distinct point. We're like, oh, the worst thing possible has happened. And actually,
really matter.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like, no one cares. And then another point for consideration is them getting a stadium. And that's an interesting one because that one has like several points where it's like there's not really a singular moment where it happened. There's them announcing the deal, there's like the rezonings happening, and it's kind of drawn out. But now it's like real. It's happening, and also it feels like it doesn't really matter.
I think there's actually a pretty tangible point for this league that we can look at, and that's the Apple takeover.
Yeah.
And I think that's been pretty significant in terms of how the culture's felt around the league overall, especially because that coincided with the SB Nation breakup. So there's no real like independent voices anymore. And it just kind of feels a little bit more single state entity.
there's not. I mean, as we've touched on this in recent episodes, but I mean, there's not really anything being written and like
or covered
discussed
or cared about
the league other than like league ad copy and like the Matt Doyle column where he's stretched covering 70 different teams.
And that existed before when we had like different broadcast channels, but back then they would have incentive to actually cover us because they're kind of like legacy and established media.
Right.
But like if Apple is just doing it to avoid of nothing, then who the fuck is watching this or caring about this?
Yeah. There was some article that came out in the last month that was asking other fan bases about like who they hate the most. And somebody had a good quote tweet where they were like, it's fascinating that the Red Bulls, who are like the most rudderless team in the league, are so hated by so many fan bases, when we haven't been good in quite a while now. Been off the air for some time now. And suggests that like nothing else is really going on.
No, nothing has really gripped people about the last few years. I mean, to add to your point about the City Cup win, I mean, I kind of touched on it. If I wanted to have one kind of like all encompassing or maybe more of an on-field point for kind of microcosm of where the league is at right now. It's kind of a point that I was making a little bit online last year in the wake of Messi coming over and all the Miami stuff, which is that, and the stuff going on with the Open Cup earlier this year, which is that, okay, we're now at a point with MLS and just, their grip on domestic soccer and all that to where there's like a million different trophies now to go with, Leagues Cup and Campeones Cup and all this kind of stuff. And, and we've discussed recently how much the Shield versus MLS Cup debate has become completely fogged up recently. And we're basically at a point now where MLS can decide whether or not a team winning a trophy matters based on whether that team is,
Marketable.
good marketable or, good to get eyeballs on. Cause that, and, it just makes, adds to everything else big and small that's become really disorienting about the league the last few years.
Yeah. Who won MLS Cup last year?
I mean, if it wasn't for the fact that the
Columbus.
crew, it wasn't for the fact that the crew are just, perhaps the most advanced technical team that the league has ever seen, probably would again be pretty forgettable. We had the year before that, we had LAFC winning that cup with the crazy Gareth Bale goal and like all that kind of stuff. And then just Bale leaves. And it's just kind of like there was no legacy for that. Like,
They're not building the narrative or the story for like,
when
it's all these just short little bursts of caffeine.
right. And like, I think they're just being lazy about like the Columbus thing, for example. Like we can clearly see there's an interesting project going on there. There's a very big narrative. There's a personality even in Wilfred Nancy that's just not really being like talked about. I think that maybe like, there's a lot of direction probably about kind of like how things should be like running, or like they just go for kind of easy, maybe like,
Well, not to get into one of my other crank things, but I mean, even with Nancy, like half the discourse, I mean, there does seem to be a little bit, I mean, mind you, there's only like 6 national journalists now. I mean, and I was just for shits and giggles, I was looking at like the Athletic MLS page the other day to see, because I was literally I was like asking myself, like, how much is even being written about MLS, to go to my earlier point. There's only been like 2 feature like MLS articles published on the Athletic in like the last week, in like the home stretch of the season. Like, it's either that or the league site putting out ad copy. But anyway, to get back to my other point, it's kind of like there does seem to be an attempt to talk a little bit about Nancy and how much he's impacted, Montreal, and then of course Columbus even further. But then even half of that discourse, to go into one of my crank things, is about like, oh, should Nancy go to Europe? Should Nancy be the next, MLS, asset to move to Europe? And it's just like, that is such a problematic, completely just dead-ended, useless way of looking at a sports league. Like, and I'm going to start really just rambling and going into tangents here, so I'll try and stop. But it's like, it just goes into the whole thing about how MLS, has completely turned itself into a sales league and oriented so much of the framing and media around the league to promoting individual players for sales and promoting young players and all that kind of stuff. And it dovetails with how much, fan base and media has thought of itself as covering like marketing, and what they're rooting for is for the league to do well business wise and clubs to do well business wise. And it's just like, I feel like we should be so far beyond that. Like, the league is secure now. We don't have to worry about that. We don't have to be rooting for the business model. We don't have to be rooting for players to be sold or for, players and coaches to be getting respect in Europe.
Right.
I mean, that's happened. That's all happened.
Yeah, it happened
we should
quietly.
be starting to act like we've been there before. We should not be dancing in the end zone or just, losing our minds about all these things and pretending they're novelties when they're not anymore.
Columbus is an interesting lens into that as well, because like as you hint at, in many ways it's not new for MLS fans and American soccer fans to be really invested in like the marketing and health of the league and everything. But think about like the different narratives and battles like 10, 15 years ago. The ongoing concern of like mostly MLS original teams that like, are they going to get out of their stadium? Are they going to get a soccer specific stadium? If they have a soccer specific stadium that kind of sucks, like Columbus's, are they going to get a new one? Columbus was sort of an interesting flashpoint for that, where sort of, a good result happened. Like, the crew basically, still exists. Like, legally, they're technically a new corporation or whatever, but it's still the crew. And then they got a new stadium, financed by beautiful, wonderful blood money, Quicken Loans money or whatever. And
Actually, truck stop fraud money.
oh, sorry. And it was, I think, sort of interesting because like it kind of worked in a way that you thought wasn't supposed to work anymore. Like there was kind of no sign that like Columbus is a market that would actually succeed, I think. And then they got their new stadium like a couple miles further downtown, and then they've won a couple cups, but it doesn't seem to have mattered. Then you've got like teams like Dallas, who are still in the middle of nowhere, that have this stadium that they're just slowly pouring more money into, and the team is kind of middling, and it just doesn't seem to matter. Then you've got Chicago, our first opponent that we played in this slate of matches we're talking about today, that is now in sort of a weird quantum state where they're bouncing back and forth between Soldier Field and apparently still play a couple games at Bridgeview, which I will say I think is kind of, I don't know. I feel like it's almost kind of a flex of the Fire to be like, yeah, we've got two stadiums, whatever. Like we've got an auxiliary stadium for when we need it. But like, yeah, the whole sense of like, oh my God, is the league going to make it is totally gone, which I think does indicate that we've moved into a new stage for sure. Although it can be hard to pinpoint exactly what that moment was.
I feel like they only do the Bridgeview thing because there's probably that like leftover contract or whatever with them to have games there or whatever. But that's so like weird to think about. It's almost like the NYCFC situation too, where they just different because they're more like wandering of a team where they don't own.
Well, and the Fire had season way back in the day where they played at like a fucking high school in the suburbs in Naperville.
I mean, I remember going to, do we go to like Harvard or whatever for that?
I didn't go to that
It was
one.
me and you, Open Cup game.
Yeah, the Revs
Still
apparently have a plan for a stadium, but like it didn't pass, but it doesn't seem to matter. I don't know.
I'm hoping that happens with the City Stadium, even though I'm like burying my head in the sand that I know that it's not.
Yeah, but then meanwhile, our other opponent in this last month, Sporting Kansas City, still has their coach of like 15 years, Peter Vermees, and is just holding steady. Although they're less competitive year in, year out than they used to be. And I didn't realize till we played them this month that Alan Pulido has been with them for like 4 years now. And
An eternity in current MLS.
And I think he moved there when he was 29, and now he's 33. And I think that's another good example of like, that's the sort of move that would have been a big deal in 2016, 2017. Like, oh, somebody was able to attract like a sort
a
of
real L-Tree player. Like.
Yeah. And like not totally a retirement gig. But now it's just sort of one of a million moves. And again, it's not like a bad thing per se. It's almost like the league in some ways is suffering from success. But I guess my one bit of hope maybe is that it does seem like maybe right now there is a little bit more squad stability than there have been in the last 5 years. It feels like there was just an incredible amount of turnover from like 2018 to like 2022-ish.
I think there was a lot of teams that were probably constricted from changing up a lot of their squads during the pandemic that had to really hustle and be really hyper in like 21, 22. Because I remember, 2021, part of the bounty of that whole first window in 2021 where Thelwell signed all the loan players and stuff like that, was that every other team in the league like literally couldn't sign anybody,
right?
Let alone to a loan. So I think there was a lot of just built up pressure that got released. And then like you're saying, there maybe is starting to be a little bit more of a settling at some of these teams. But I don't know. It's it seems like, maybe if we want to start to segue into the games themselves, that teams that are a little bit maybe less ambitious and further down on the ambition scale, like a Chicago, like a Kansas City, who are content to just be kind of a regular MLS team with an old style coach who, just kind of doesn't want to reinvent the wheel, doesn't want to do anything crazy, just wants to put a team out there. They give the Red Bulls some problems. That kind of shook out in some of these games.
Yeah. Before we move on, there's one thing that's kind of unrelated that I wanted to bring up because we were talking about SKC in such a nostalgic lens. Oh, I'm thinking about now, like the team trying to get Bradley Wright Phillips that last goal to break the goal tying record against SKC in like 2013, but also very nostalgic about SKC legend Brad Davis.
How dare you?
That's all I wanted to
Sure,
say.
you mean he just retired there so he could get an early start on his career as a sheriff. I wonder if he's still a sheriff. But that's an interesting shout because in 2013? I don't know. Brad broke the goal record against SKC with like a brace or a hat trick, I think.
A brace.
And then that 2014 season where we beat them late in that wild card play-in was sort of a mini watermark for like being able to get over a hump of sorts, where I think we were down fairly late and we scored 2 goals. I know we scored like the winning goal fairly late, and it kind of changed the mood on that sort of playoff run. So hey, at least there's something consistent with SKC, or something old with SKC to look back on our history. But yeah, I mean, in these games, we had 2 draws and a loss. I think you can say that our form is firmly mediocre no, it's bad at this
It's negative,
point.
yeah, definitely on the negative side.
We're still in 4th place though.
Because
To add to our entire,
Yeah.
little discourse we just had.
it's unthinkable how bad the rest of the East is to not punish us for all of these drop points.
Yeah. It's crazy, really. 2 of these...
Is this what it feels like to be a perennial Arsenal fan?
Not even. This is like further
Back
down.
in like 2013, 2015.
But both of the draws are at home. I think, the not Jeremy, Julian Hall late goal, I think is indicative of sort of the theme of this middle part of the season where it's a late, exciting goal. It gives the team something exciting to talk about. And it's like, look, what a dramatic thing. And the young local kid comes good. But it's ultimately a goal that comes at the end of like 89 minutes of kind of soccer, and is a quality finish on a broken play. And it is a quality finish. Good moment for him. I would say, I don't know, am I eating crow? I don't think so. Because last episode I was like, oh, are we even giving Hall useful minutes by asking him to go out there and
just try stuff?
Lo and behold, the next game he goes out and does this. And yes, he scores an equalizer. But, dare I say, I still think the underlying point might still stand. Like, I don't know if we're really like integrating him
Learning
into a
anything
team.
about how he plays. Just like we didn't learn much about who Serge Ngoma was when
Right.
we lost our minds about him scoring a late little freak goal in the desperation
Or-
moments of a game, and then he disappeared for 2 years.
Slightly more seriously, Caden Clark, who did
Yeah,
it
totally.
4 or 5 times, but
Right.
then was never like fully thrown into
Exactly.
a full system.
Yeah,
And,
I mean, he's, by far the best illustration of it. I hadn't even thought of that.
yeah. And then we do see Carballo get some more regular minutes in this month, though. Evidently, it has not changed the points haul. But have you learned anything about Felipe Carballo in these 3 games?
I have positioned myself negatively against him this past couple
Positioned
of
yourself negatively.
I think I see not the highest ceiling from him as a player. Like, he feels to me very limited, and this is just vibes. Like, there's just nothing that supports this. I just don't like the way that he doesn't really pick up his head and swivel a lot as a central midfielder. I think to me that's just like one of those kind of like secondary traits I always look out for in that kind of position, and I don't really think he scans as well as he should. And that's kind of something that maybe he'll make me crow about. I hope he does, but I just don't think he's got a big future. And also, you know, he did kind of cause a really bad penalty later. So
That's interesting, because I might counter, for this player in this part of the field, in this circumstance, is it the worst thing to have a high floor, low ceiling player in this position? Maybe not.
maybe not, but I think we also have Edelman already.
But it does hurt when the guy he's replacing is Frankie Amaya. He's a pretty good player.
Yeah, high ceiling and low floor.
I think Carvalho's fine. I don't really see much to criticize, especially as far as being MLS level and compared to some of the other midfielders left in the squad. I mean, he definitely has more of an engine than Edelman, more bite than Edelman, and he moves the ball, I don't know, pretty quickly, and he hits some sharp passes. It's just our team is not set up, you know, in a way where anybody really knows where the ball's going to be at any moment. I mean, kind of like I said the last episode when we just saw him in sub moments that, you know, he was hitting, you know, a few diagonal balls that just literally went out of bounds because nobody knew to trigger for them or anything like that. So I don't know. I mean, we're not going to really learn much about him in any direction. We always knew we were never going to learn much about him in any direction because he was just going to be a lone player. He was just going to be here for a month or two, especially for a central midfielder where it's not a position of production or, you know, any kind of like metric, you know, that you can put on it. It's more of kind of body of work and being the engine of a successful team. We're never going to really learn if he's that guy unless he sticks around for a longer period of time. So, yeah, I don't know. In the meantime, yeah, as far as just pure like game-changing moments and impact on the game, yeah, all we really have is that penalty that he conceded. But beyond that, I mean, I don't really see much to complain about. It's just it's just like a lot of midfielders that we've brought in and lone guys we've brought in. It's like they're being put into a team that's not functioning very well, and it's hard for any player to show their talent when that's the case.
Yeah, I also agree generally with your assessment that I think, like, compared to Edelman, that he seems to have a little bit more of that, like fight, aggression. But I think my problem with it is, at least so far, it feels like he's not really here to replace Edelman, but he's just here to pair up with him. I'd be interested into seeing what it would look like with him playing next to like someone like Doncor maybe instead, to see if that is something different. But like, to your point, yeah, we do have him until I guess next summer, but that's also not really any more better of a learning period than just having the next couple of months, really, right?
Maybe even Stroud drops back and he plays alongside Stroud.
Stroud.
I wouldn't really be opposed to that.
He's back.
Yeah. I mean, he's like, is he a DP like in name only? Like, will he sign a contract that'll be a DP contract if we do like exercise an option to buy? Because I don't like, you know, if you have DP expectations for him, I feel like I'm not really seeing it, but that also might just be circumstantial with how we like
But even if
put the deal together.
Not to detour back into our earlier conversation again, but the fact that it's not even really clear which players are DP level or not, or that you can orient yourself as far as like who's a DP, who's a TAM player, who's a GAM player, like that's all been completely thrown out the window and gotten way too confusing for any normal person to follow. I guess the league has done some, you know, gesture towards putting out like the official roster classifications recently and stuff like that. But again, the actual rules of like how TAM works versus how you can buy out a DP and how, like, you know, fucking Zlatan Ibrahimovic was not a DP. Like that's all just become completely absurd.
In Miami,
not
obviously.
worth following. And
Yeah.
just another thing that you can't really latch onto about the league and like, you know, orient yourself about with the league. And, you know,
I will
That's
say,
just because
lost.
you're not an accountant hobbyist.
No,
I
I'm
think
not.
if you were I imagine accountant hobbyists would be especially disillusioned by this situation, to be quite honest. But with Carballo, I think like even though he has played like much quicker than most Red Bulls midseason signings so far, and even though he is a year-long loan instead of just a couple months, it I think still raises the same question of like, is this a building block or not? It's not clear whether like they are actually going to build around him. One thing that confused us at the beginning part of the season was actually bringing in Emil Forsberg. Remember him? And I will say at the most promising parts at the beginning of this season, it looked for a second like, oh, this might be a squad that is like assembled somewhat in a way that has like a vision around it, like with Forsberg and Amaya in the middle, and then like I guess Schwarz is serious about Stroud enough that getting rid of Yearwood seems like a daring choice, but like maybe this is a team that like the manager actually has a vision for. Lo and behold, Forsberg got hurt, and then we sold Amaya, and this no longer looks like a potential new era of the Red Bulls. This feels much more like a continuation of previous years. Again, back to the theme of like periodization. When you think about periods of an individual club, the managers obviously offer a very like built-in sort of structure for how to think of a club, similar to like presidential terms or something. That said, you can still find some continuities and some junctures in between. For a second, I thought, oh yeah, maybe this is the Shores era. Now at this point in the season, I feel less confident that this is like actually a new Schwarz era. It feels like this roster still has a lot of the Struber and even Thelwell eras that are really running it forward. And at this point in the season, it feels like the goal and the ambition is just sort of to get through the season in the middle of the table and see what happens, rather than sort of asserting a run at the top of it, unfortunately. But I would say we'll see, but I don't think we will see. I think this is pretty much it. But it does bring us to our Saturday game against City, which is our second derby of the year.
I thought you were going to say the second game with stakes of the year.
Well, is it? I am saying, I think this game feels like it has not that many stakes to me, like all-time low stakes maybe for a derby game, I have to say. Because one, I don't know how City is still beneath us in the table, because we've just been doing so mediocre. Actually, no, worse than mediocre. Like drawing half your games and losing the other half is worse than mediocre. But yet they've like dropped further behind us in the table, which is shocking to me.
We're not going to talk about how Dante finally broke his big streak. Dante.
I will say, good finish. Good job, Dante, on that. And the relief on his face was like very relatable.
I'm sorry.
To be honest.
Which game are we even talking about?
Atlanta.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like
the latest one, because it took him a
right.
long
I'm sorry,
time.
but like when all the games are like 1-1, 2-2 things where like it just leads to a result, it makes it harder for like individual moments to stick out,
Well, we're on periods.
Right.
So
exactly.
it's
But
like,
the periods
the
are
September
marked
period.
by stagnancy. We're in the interregnum.
I guess I do just kind of want to get on my soapbox about Von Zer for a second and just, tie it into a little
He's
bit of the
a
theme
DP,
of the
did you know that?
episode. Well, yeah, no shit. The Apple broadcast and like the team social media and stuff like that is just, like, oh my God, Dante Von Zer, he's finally done it. It's the great moment for this, wonderful player. It's just like, it's part of just this obsession with like I said earlier in in the show, just like these pretending everything is a novelty and everything is the most important thing you've ever seen and everything has to be an important memory. And instead of just recognizing things for what they are, and in this case, it's a player who has not only been shit for the club, especially this year, not been a very good player, not been a very productive player, but a player who embarrassed the club, player who brought shame on the club. And the fact that we're so obsessed, we have so little to talk about and latch on to, that we're pretending that is like a big deal or anything to be proud of. I think, a lot of people will consider it like, I guess, being positive and trying to, be supportive fans or whatever. I find it to be just, a perfect example of how completely bankrupt being a fan of this team has become in recent years, to be honest.
Yeah. And I think the Atlanta result, also it's sort of designed in a lab a little bit where like it's the unsatisfying middle ground where like the team technically, like got a last minute goal to save a result, where if you have any sort of common sense or just like we're watching the game or attached to it, you still understand that like the form is bad. This is not a good thing. This is not anything really to necessarily celebrate. But then it still allows the team to be like, these vibes, moments like these, unlocking core memories,
right?
For like the last minute call, and you're like, okay, sure. I don't want to, rain on your parade too much, but like also, can we like not pretend to all be brand new right now?
Right.
Well,
and then what did Schwartz say after that game too? Where like, I guess, which he's really starting to push the envelope as far as
the
people
Federer
giving
thing?
him credit. Right. I'm trying to find the exact
Like
quote,
Federer
but, like,
only won 56% of games.
yeah, it's just like kind of like a dumb point, even if it wasn't in the context of this
different
team
sport.
recently. Yeah,
different way that points work.
Yeah, and like I don't even know necessarily what how he only Schwartz said he and the team talked about Roger Federer and how he only wins 56% of his points, yet is considered one of the greatest tennis players of all time. I don't understand. First off, I don't understand if he means 56% of like 56% of winning games and like
No, he means
getting
like
56% of the points, or like only completing like 56% of passes or something like that.
I think he means like the individual points.
individual
Yeah.
like tennis 15
Right.
whatever points.
Yeah.
I'm talking about like the metaphor to soccer though, and like what he means.
Oh, I see.
I think the metaphor, and because like I took German, maybe is the only reason I could possibly parse this.
Okay.
is, I think that like margins are slim, and like to be a winner, you have to be on like the positive side of like the 50-50 split.
Tony Gwynn got out 75% of the time.
Right.
You think about it that way.
I was gonna say, how many shades away are we from batting average?
Right.
But I mean, especially, or maybe he just didn't hear about it because he never like speaks to any Americans ever. Especially after there was a little bit of uproar about his comments in Build last month saying, we're not expected to win or anything like that. To come and then say something like that is just like, I don't know. Is anybody home? Does anybody actually have any sort of, again, distinction between what they're saying behind closed doors and what they would like the public to believe?
My gut feeling, my suspicion is that Sandro started the season being like, all right, it's going pretty well. Like, I like the way this is going. And then once Forsberg got hurt and we sold Amaya, he's like, yeah, all right.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just chilling. And I think he's doing a more professional job than Struber did at trying to just like fill airtime when talking to people about it. But it leads to moments like this where he's like, he's stopping short of trashing the team like Struber did, but it's also like, all right, he's digging deep into his toolbox of like, Michael Scott quotes to pull out. So, I don't know what else he's going to be able to say.
Yeah.
I think, I'm not terribly impressed with how the team is playing right now, but I also find it hard to blame him at this point in time. And I think I'm still relieved that he seems to be a fairly normal person after the like total antisocial mess that was Gerhard Struber. So that goes somewhere in my book. But Yeah, I don't know. It's also unclear to me that like if he starts next season with our club and does a poor job, it's unclear to me that this will matter to anyone at Red Bull. You know, like I don't know if it will. I think that they're looking to just like fill seats decently well through all of their events throughout the year. Like I don't know if winning really matters to them right now. So we'll see. And I don't think the bragging rights over the city matter them.
Speaking
either.
of filling seats, though, I do want to grind my gear about getting 6 emails in 3 hours in one day
Yeah,
from
that seems
the New York
sloppy.
Red Bulls. Like, what is going on? Fire your email agency. Jesus Christ.
Yeah. But yeah, we're playing City this weekend at Red Bull Arena. And I have to say, I think I feel very nonplussed about it compared to almost every other derby that we've played. And I think for me, part of it is that it feels like we're no longer fighting over the city. You know, I think and this also informs my sort of blasé attitude towards City finally getting a stadium, is that like I'm no longer worried about City taking over because like RBNY just clearly does not care about having fans in the city at this point. It's just not the vibe. They're not doing, I mean, I guess they did an event at the Soho store today, the Adidas store, but I'm sure, you know, if that's only because there is no quick check in downtown Manhattan or whatever, or no drive-through liquor stores that they could erect a little fold-up table to put someone in front of instead. I'm sure they would have loved to do that. But you know, it's I think I have no idea whether it was an order from up on high or whether it's just the organic sort of desires and strategy of the club. But there's zero sense right now of this being like a competition over like the heart of the city or anything like that from either side, really.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
like compare this to the energy from like 2015 to 2018 ish, and it's night and day.
I still have a little bit of like just the existential, I don't want this team to exist anymore kind of energy, but that's about it.
But that's gone now. I mean, since they got the stadium. So, you know, and as far as like even, you know, the sense that City used to be the more plastic fan base and the more plastic club in general, lost a little bit of our capital there as we've bemoaned lately.
Yeah,
So,
I think that's the other thing is that like I'm not really necessarily feeling like I can stand on 2 feet and say that we're the you know, savvier fan base anymore. And I'm not sure that's true anymore. But you know, we'll see. I mean, it's also funny because I think it still will be a huge churn for them when they move to Queens. I think it's gonna be a non-insignificant turnover of people who go to those games week in, week out. And
I am going to
change
say,
things.
I'm like, again, this is not to give City too much credit, but there is that they of course had the Messi show come through.
Oh, the bus thing.
Yankee Stadium over the weekend, and their supporters, ultras, I don't know if they were the fucking Nazi ones or whatever. I don't know if they're still around or not. Again, that's just another one of those things that's kind of just been lost to time and apathy recently. But they were legitimately like blocking the bus and giving the bus a hard time and being shitty to Messi and being fuck you, and
Which is a good thing.
yeah. You know, it's kind of got to tip your hat. And, you know, I kind of was thinking to myself, would that, I mean, we've had Messi visit Red Bull, and it was, you know, at least in the stand, and, you know, I'm sure officially inside the stadium, it was of course not nearly as raucous or hostile or anything like that. And, you know, there's maybe not the same spaces as like, you know, under the 4 train tracks that are around, you know, Harrison to be able to actually like siege a bus like that and have that scenario even happen. But would that situation happen with the Red Bulls fan base? I don't know these days.
No,
To be honest.
And
I don't, not even if it's only just like having pure numbers of like kind of young rowdy people. I don't know if we really have that lately.
I mean, the team is among their 20 emails they sent out in 5 minutes. Like one of them had in the footer, like, oh, like sit in the supporters section. You should check this out, which is like kind of a big shift that the team feels the need to like to advertise for that. It's sort of the opposite of the energy of the supporters groups historically.
As an independent kind of functioning.
Well, to be
Yeah.
like an organic
Yeah.
thing as opposed to top down.
I do think City somewhat benefited from like not hosting Messi for a while now. Like he played at Red Bull Arena pretty quickly.
Yeah, the aura has
and
come off a
they've-
little.
Yeah, and like now I think like the whole, documentary has been shot and published and everything. That said, I did laugh a little bit at like their supporters group, which, by the way, what is their supporters group called? Like, I don't even remember anymore, because the third rail is like the vestigial name that people sometimes still say, but like the third rail hasn't existed for like a decade at this point or something. I can't even remember what, like, if they even have a unified name for their version of the South Ward, but they put together a TIFO that was like, don't be a plastic, support your local, which is very funny. But also I find it funny that like that they view their competition as like all the 10-year-olds who are wearing Miami kits and they're walking around, they're like, God damn it, that guy should be a City fan.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, man, that sucks. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that is that they've lost the capital that they won with trashing the bus through that
Right,
TIFO.
but like part of me is like almost makes me like, I don't know what the word is, like pity them a little bit, where it's like, oh yeah, you're no longer the biggest sellout like plastic lame thing, and
exactly.
like that sucks for you. You're mad about it. Like
Yeah.
you wish you were, but you're not.
Yeah.
But I mean, maybe that's just the cycle that we went through too, I guess, in some ways. I don't know. Anyway, we're playing them on Saturday. And I mean, also on the field,
Who's on
this
their
has
team
to be-
anymore? Is
I was
Maxi
gonna
Morales
say,
still on
like,
their
I
team?
don't even know who to hate on the roster
Right.
anymore at this point.
They've been anonymous for years. I mean, ever since like, Via and stuff left.
Keaton Parks still there.
Kieton, he's like, their most like
they-
signature player.
Do they still have that Magnus Tallow guy?
Didn't is he
he
one of the
just
guys who like
traded?
No.
left or something?
I think he
but then
just got
got
transferred
like
out.
Yeah.
got transferred to one of their fake clubs so he could play for another one of their fake
like
clubs.
That was
Girona.
Tati Castellanos.
But didn't that happen with Magno too?
You might be right.
Morales
he started
like
last game.
had a like catastrophic injury and then came back again. I guess the Santi Rodriguez guy is like their big thing, but
Oh wait, they still
again,
do
no-
have Maxi Morales.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I thought he made a big thing about retiring and like after he had left and come back and
He did, and then he came back.
he's still. I thought I'd heard a thing about him like saying he was done at the end of last year.
James Sands also like left and came back or
Right.
something.
Yeah, it's
I can't wait for Mixed Discarud to come back.
That Gray guy like
Kayvon
has
Gray.
been honestly that's kind of
That's a kind of City-
for lack of a better word, Lindy, that just like random MLS right back who's like not particularly good but just hangs around. Like, all right, fair enough. Matt Freese is apparently their goalkeeper.
I still remember sitting in front of the Freezy family when they were playing against Philly and you got red carded.
I guess they tied last minute against Miami. That's exciting for them, I guess. I don't know.
I mean, probably feels the same as us tying last
Do you
minute.
think they'll even like? Do you think this will even be a chippy match? I don't think it will be.
The one at City Field was kind of chippy.
City Field, right?
Yeah.
I don't know, but now like the season is gonna be meh for either team, no matter what.
Well, I mean, like, it might be one of those things where the players are a little frustrated by everything and they just, like, use it as an excuse to take it out. Or it's just really boring. Like, it could go either way.
Apparently City legitimately shut down Messi in this game over the weekend. So apparently they've learned how to, use that field defensively pretty well recently under Cushing. So maybe they, I mean, certainly with the way we play with this 4-2-2-2 recently is very static and predictable, and you can easily just kind of stand in the way of it. So I don't know. I would think that City is able to kind of neutralize our attack, and we might end up in another low-scoring, tight late season MLS season pass game.
Oh boy. Well, what's on the calendar for us after that? We've got Toronto
Not much left. Yeah.
away. And remember the days where like we would look at the calendars like potential excuses for weekend trips
Yeah.
or something? No longer.
I
That's on
didn't,
a
I didn't
Wednesday
even go
anyway.
to Charlotte this year.
Yeah.
That had become like a tradition for you.
I know.
Yeah.
And then Atlanta on
Got
Saturday.
no CLT
We
this
didn't
year.
even mention. Come on now.
No crown.
Come on. Didn't even mention in the whole like discussion of eras everything how much the Atlanta thing is just dead. Although, you know, that's sort of natural, I guess. That was a
Yeah.
good example of a rivalry that was always a little bit more competitive and circumstantial rather than like geographic, you know.
Right.
That team also just peaked too early for their own.
Yeah, they've
good.
been doing worse than us. Not that like any league media organs would ever admit it, but
Yeah. And so we've got City, Toronto, Atlanta, and Columbus to close the season. Not a bad little lineup of like pretty either interesting
Kind of bellwether
or like,
teams,
you
yeah.
know, good or big teams. I guess the
Columbus.
Toronto and Atlanta matchups these days are sort of meh for how decent the teams are. Toronto, I guess, is a playoff team. But I don't know. I fully expect this team to get
Draw
1 point
every
per
one.
game and end up in fourth place.
Yep.
At the end
Sounds
of the
about right.
season. Although I guess the question is,
I think we win one and we lose one though. Out of those,
I think we've been slowly having our gap decrease over the last month, I think.
Yeah.
So there's the potential that like all of the sudden we drop to like 8th really abruptly. But that said, we're only a point ahead of Orlando and only 2 points ahead of Charlotte. So
the
you know,
table
like,
right now is actually lining up very well with my predicted table that I put up at the start of the season.
Oh, yeah?
They would just need Red Bulls to drop a few places and Orlando and City to pop up one or two.
I'm feeling pretty good about my early season prognostication, which is that we would start hot and then Forsberg would get
Flatten
hurt
out.
and then flatten out and then it would be mid. So that's more or less happened. I didn't
forgot
have
what I
Amaya getting sold on my thing, but I feel pretty good about that. I mean, yeah, there's 3 teams beneath us that are within one result of surpassing us. But, you know, evidently they've been just chugging along with only a point a game too. So we'll see. It looks like right now the 4th through 7th range is the likely destination for the Red Bulls for this season. It will take quite a lot for us to drop to 10th place at this point.
what would it take?
I
Wasn't
think-
third right now?
I think we would actually, if we would have to lose out definitively to like, if we win
numbers wise.
Yeah. Cause we're 10 points up from,
Oh, that's
10th.
right.
yeah.
They were posting like all of the
So
scenarios.
They're probably like, yeah, I guess if we win, we technically clinch a playoff spot.
What? How far are we from third?
12 points.
Yeah, that
And we're 10 points from being out
And
of
who
the
is third?
playoffs. Columbus.
Okay, yeah.
And Cincinnati.
Do you
they're
actually
tied.
think we deserve to be ahead of like Columbus
No, I just
or
wanna-
Cincinnati or Miami?
Well, I'm
We
just
don't
like-
even deserve to be adjacent to
I
them.
know.
I'm
it's
just looking
bizarre.
at like if there's any motivation for the guys, you know, like is like
A whole
beside-
playoff spot.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. It's like a home playoff spot.
Dylan Nealis did have that quote that was like, yeah, I think we did get complacent, maybe. Which, hey, points for being honest, I guess. But two, also like, guys, why were you complacent in 4th place? Like, come on. Like, we can look at you guys selling Amaya and being like, season's over. But theoretically, you are supposed to resist.
Who's going to
concluding
yell
that.
at them? Sandro Schwartz, Julian de Guzman,
Julian de Guzman.
Jochen Schneider, Mario Gomez. You think any of these guys give a shit that New York Red Bulls are having kind of another lame season? You think it really bothers them at all?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I had a letter from Marc de Grand Prix and Jochen Schneider assuring me that this would be a good season. So.
Thank you, gracias. In the parentheses, I forgot forgot that they put gracias in parentheses on that letter.
Just in
and
case you
now
didn't
That's just
remember
what
it.
I think of. Yeah. What a move. It's like they didn't publish a Spanish version of the letter. They just put thank you, and the only word that they translated was gracias. In case you didn't know what that meant. It means thank you. Come on. Yeah.
Not good enough is Spanish for no bueno enough.
Well, and then I guess I heard that on Noche Latina, which I guess was this last week, they had misspelled Colombia as Colombia the whole time, which is another just little detail that they make sure to get right for all of these things. But I don't know. It is also funny when I'm getting all these push notifications where they're like, have no plans on Saturday. And I'm like, that really doesn't make me want to go to the game.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, you're not like...
You don't got anything better to do.
The only
Yeah,
people
I'm like,
who are
well,
coming,
now I feel motivated to have something better to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, damn, okay.
like the only people who are going to be at this game are losers like me.
Yeah, I'm like, when you put it that way, gosh, it feels like you're situating this in my mind as like my backup option, like
Yeah.
the worst thing I could do. No,
It's like,
thank
what
you.
about like, you could just easily say, do you need plans this weekend to position yourself as being the plan? But no, you're the thing you'd go to when your plans fell through.
Yeah.
We are the self-help classes for the cancer cope classes from the beginning of Fight Club.
Oh my god. Well, do you guys
Cheaper
have
than a
plans this
movie.
weekend?
Well, I was thinking about maybe going to the soccer game, but now I might do a glass blowing class instead.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very
Okay.
Brooklyn. of
While
you.
drinking wine.
Wow. Yeah, I wonder how long is it till the Red Bulls are on Class Pass? Attending a Red Bulls game. We'll see. All right, anything else to say about this month? No? Okay. To the next period.
Our new captain, Daniel Edelman. Ta-da.
It's Alex!